and welcome to World Insight on CGTN, coming to you from Beijing. I'm Tian Wei. On today's program, the first visit by German Chancellor Angela Merkel since Russia's annexation of Crimea. Are German-Russian ties going to warm up? And although we usually see polar exploration as a man's world, I interviewed the two women who defied the stereotypes and traversed Antarctica. And we start today's show with German Chancellor Angela Merkel's visit to Russia. This is the first bilateral visit since Russia's annexation of Crimea in the year 2014. They are expected to discuss fighting ISIL and Western sanctions on Russia. With Germany being a leading EU member, will this signal warming ties between Russia and the EU?
Renewed dialogue between Berlin and Moscow. German Chancellor Angela Merkel met President Vladimir Putin in the Black Sea resort city of Sochi. The meeting comes at a low point in bilateral relations over the war in Syria and Russia's annexation of Crimea, with Germany the driving force behind the EU sanctions against Moscow in response. Ms. Merkel wants Russia to seek an end to the conflict in Ukraine by using its influence on pro-Russian separatists, and also needs Moscow's cooperation to bring peace to Syria. But President Putin equally needs Ms. Merkel's support in lifting the EU sanctions. He's also keen to hear her opinion of US President Donald Trump, whom she recently met. The pair appears keen to renew their long-standing personal ties, but both sides have played down any suggestion that there could be a breakthrough. European diplomats have turned down a new meeting of the Normandy format, in which the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, France and Germany have tried to stabilize eastern Ukraine, most recently at a fraught meeting in Berlin in October. The two leaders would meet again at the upcoming G20 summit, to be hosted in Hamburg in July by Ms. Merkel. But how to close the wide political gap between the freedom-loving Chancellor and the authoritarian Kremlin boss remains the question.
For more on German Chancellor Angela Merkel's Russia visit, we are joined in our Beijing studio, Cui Hongjian, Director of the Department for European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies. Also joining us in Beijing, Jörg Wuttke, Vice President of BASF in China. He's also President of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China, originally coming from Germany. And also joining us in Moscow, we have Mr. Mark Slaboda, who is an international relations and security analyst. Welcome as well. So, can we expect much, Mr. Slaboda, now you are in Moscow, about this visit?
Yeah, I think expectations are low. The rhetoric coming out of the Kremlin is that they would like this meeting to help normalize relations. Out of Berlin, the rhetoric speaks of engaging with Russia. I think that about sums up what can be expected here. It's simply an opportunity for the two of them to sit down and start talking again after the disagreements and the silence of the last few years.
Does Crimea still matter, Mr. Wuttke?
Certainly it matters a great deal. It has changed the equation between Russia and Germany. I would agree that actually we expect little, but Merkel would not go to Moscow just to come back empty-handed, so something must have been prepared for her. Must have been an agreement on something. Russia is very keen to have the sanctions lifted. We welcome President Putin in Hamburg at G20 in July. Merkel is going to chair this. I can imagine that this also plays into the question how to treat Putin when he's visiting Germany first time.
How much does that have to do with Germany's aspiration, it seems, more and more, of becoming an intermediator of the world, almost?
Yes.
Mr. Wuttke, originally from Germany, is having a big laugh, but I'm going to come back to you later. But Mr. Cui first.
Yes, I think that it would be a very good opportunity for Chancellor Merkel to play a positive role, especially moderating, between the European side and the Russia side. But still, I think that she has to face a so big problem or so big obstacles from European side, especially within the member states of the European Union. If we know that there are different understanding, different feelings about Russia, especially so-called the threat from Russia in different member states. So I think, yes, this visit by Chancellor Merkel would be a very, very strong symbolic message to Russia, to other member states of the European Union. But I am very, very suspicious about any, substantial achievement of this visit.
About that so-called international mediator
Yes.
role, Chancellor Merkel seems to playing these days. Mr. Wotka, you laughed earlier, but Madam Chancellor has actually hosted the daughter of President Trump in G20 Women Summit and led her to explain about her love toward her father, even though there are different oppositions coming from the audience. But still, Chancellor Merkel, at the end of the dinner, suggesting she is playing the daughter a very instrumental role. And so, isn't that what she has carved for herself, an international mediator, linking the United States, Russia, Europe, everywhere?
Well, I was laughing because we Germans get raised after 2 world wars that we initiated and caused so much havoc to actually lay low and not be dominant in any world politics and just basically focus on economics, sort of reflecting on actually what Deng Xiaoping was propagating 40 years ago, to lay low and let others shine in the world politics. But of course, the fact that Germany is such an economic powerhouse, the fact that others that used to be dominant like Britain and France are stepping aside, left us in this awkward position where sometimes people like the Polish Foreign Minister Sikosty is yelling us, why don't you lead? But it's for us very, very hard. Merkel has dealt with the Greek crisis quite well, despite the fact that she made many enemies. She has been leading the sanctions, surprisingly, against Russia. And of course, she's trying to find a way how to deal with Donald Trump that is so different from her. And I think the fact that she's reaching out to his daughter, it just shows feminine charm and wisdom.
Great way to describe it. But what about from you, Mr. Sleboda? Is this meeting about Chancellor Merkel, or is it this meeting about President Putin?
Well, I'm sure both leaders feel that it's about themselves. I think a great deal of this for Chancellor Merkel is about optics and domestic politics. She's going into a heated election where she's facing Martin Schulz, who was the president of the European Parliament. And German business has been loudly complaining to Merkel for years about the regime of unilateral sanctions and then counter sanctions with Russia. It has really hurt German business. Germany and Russia were the top trading partners before the start of the crisis when the European Union and the United States backed the overthrow of the democratically elected Ukrainian government back in 2014. And German-Russian trade was, at the time, 80 billion euros. It has since dropped as of the beginning of last year to only 47 billion euros. German business is furious. They want the sanctions lifted because their exports to Russia, both manufacturing and agricultural, have suffered enormously. And I don't think that she's going to lift sanctions. Russia's certainly not prepared. They're prepared for sanctions regime indefinitely. In fact, Russian agriculture is booming here. Merkel needs the optics of giving German business some kind of bone. Giving them something that will help her domestically to shore up campaign funds. And I think the finalization of the deal with Nord Stream 2, the gas route from Russia to Germany, which was announced that financing had been achieved with major European energy partners this week, will be a big part of that.
But, Mr. Wotka, you are from the German business community. How big a bone it has to be? And will that be only about this gas project or something else?
Well, I think that German business has been loyal behind the Chancellor, abiding to her plea in order to have sanctions. Of course, we don't like it. We like to engage in business, and we had, as rightfully pointed out, nearly lost half of the business. At the same time, companies have been selling wind gas, a gas distribution company, to a Russian company. So business was also going on and actually selling assets from Germany to Russian companies, such as a refinery to Rosneft. So it was not completely cut off, but more can be done. It's us. I think it's just not looking for funds from companies because we don't donate really. But it looks like we are some sort of engaging again. The time of chill is over. We have to do something. We don't want to put Putin in the box, and I guess now's the right time.
Before I go to Mr. Cui, I want to go back to Mr. Sloboda, because you do see very interesting phenomenon. On the one hand, at the beginning of the Trump administration, he talked about getting closer to Russia. Eventually, it didn't work out until so far. And yet, you see the other way around with the Europeans, including Germany. Very cold at the very beginning, but right now try to warm up while the U.S. cooling down. So how should we read the change of temperatures from two sides?
Yeah, the German government was extremely unhappy with Trump's election in the United States. The German state media, Deutsche Welle and others had effectively campaigned for Hillary Clinton. In fact, many European leaders openly endorsed her, and they've paid a price for that. U.S.-European relations have chilled dramatically, President Trump has even gone so far as to at least rhetorically present Germany with a large bill which he claims they owe for his defense of U.S. defense of Germany with NATO, whatever the reality of that. Chancellor Merkel is often depicted as a pragmatic leader, but I think the truth is more that she is a rather very fervent liberal ideological, and Trump is if anything the opposite. So they have very bad personal relations, and at a time when we have this split, this rift growing between the U.S. and the EU over Trump, and very bad relations between the EU and Turkey, particularly with Chancellor Merkel and Turkish President Erdogan over the issue of refugees, and Erdogan threatening to flood Germany with even more refugees, something which has hurt her in domestic politics.
So your point is?
I think she's got to do a little bit of balancing with Russia at this point.
Balancing? What extent? What does it mean for political gains? To what extent it could become a political failure?
Yes. I think that for this visit, Chancellor Merkel not only she wants to give a very positive response to some business people in Germany, because as we know, in the last 2 years, against the background of the sanction over Russia from the European Union, there has been a very huge increase of investment from Germany to Russia. Also at the same time, how could Chancellor Merkel to deal with some especially negative response from her coalition partner? Also, we know this visit by Chancellor Merkel was announced by the German government the first time. It was announced by President Putin and Merkel's partner in Bavaria. When this Prime Minister of Bavaria visited Russia in this March. So I think it gives a very, very interesting phenomenon or situation, say that yes, a balance between economy, politics, between the domestic politics and the international politics.
Just think about all of these politics. Quite an interesting timing, isn't it, Mr. Woodcock? I mean, the UK just tried to brought up its plan toward the European Union, and Chancellor Merkel even said we should have talk and dialogue before letting that plan to go to a vote. And also, France, at the time when Chancellor Merkel visits, actually is on its way to have a new president, but do not yet. So this is a totally interesting timing. President Trump just has his 100-day celebration, quote unquote. Isn't that interesting?
Well, first of all, I guess that on the outside, the relationship between Trump and Merkel looked tense. At the same time, I understand that he's once in a while calling her to ask for her opinion because she's the most well-versed, experienced global politician by now. So in a way, it looks much more tougher. The fact that she invited smartly his daughter to come over shows that she wants to reach out to him. At the same time, she has to look into her own constituency. The elections are around the corner. We have more than 1 million former Soviet Union citizens in our country. They can all vote, and I know
In
many
Germany.
of them. They're all with German backgrounds. They have now German passports. They were people that lived in Soviet Union for a long time. These people vote, and there has to be a resolution somehow engaging with Russia again. Crimea seems like a lost case. There's no hope that this is going to change anytime soon in the next years. And the deep affection that many, particularly East Germans, have for Russia, and it's reciprocated by the Russians. I know it. I'm married to a Russian. My father-in-law was a Russian diplomat over here. Is showing that actually the Russians feel deeply hurt by the fact that, in particular, Germany was turning its back on Russia. So something has to happen to bring actually some sort of hope to this. But at the same time, for Germany, it's a very tricky situation. I know this also in my family, because my daughter-in-law is Ukrainian, and so I have geopolitics in my family, and it's a nation that we don't want to let just fall apart. So for Merkel, it's a tricky way to reach out to Putin and try to get something out of this, and not just please business.
From the other, by the way, you have very complicated family politics to play with back at home. A lot of sympathy for you. But Mr. Sleboda, how much do you think President Putin could wish that once he cracked Chancellor Merkel, he could also crack the whole the whole European Union?
Yeah, I don't think that Putin has any intentions, whatever the salacious headlines in a lot of the Western press, of cracking Angela Merkel or the European Union. The European Union is a big trade partner for Russia. Russia would wish for better geopolitical relations. They're extremely unhappy with EU's actions in the Ukraine and the overthrow of the government there. But you know, they want to do business with the European Union. This is a capitalist government in the Kremlin, and Putin actually, to my belief, overly romanticizes Germany. There's a lot of Russians that feel that the Russian president is too close to Germany because of the time he spent there and the fluency in their language, and if anything, he has appeased. I think what Putin wants most out of this meeting is they want Germany to use its leverage, which the regime which seized power in Kiev, to adhere to the Minsk Accords. There is a whole raft of political portions of the Minsk Accords. It's primarily a political document to bring the regime in Kiev together with the people of East Ukraine, make them sit down and work out a political settlement between themselves. That's actually what the Minsk Accord does. And the regime in Kiev has absolutely refused to sit down with the people of East Ukraine. And a big part of that is because they fear that you know, their grip on power is tenuous. It's a result of the Maidan Putsch. And if they are faced to stand in elections and you know, at an open table with the people of East Ukraine, that really might lead to their regime falling apart.
I see. Mr. Toye, what is the best scenario for President Putin for this specific visit by Chancellor Merkel? Is it about at least go parallel, two tracks? One is about the discussion how to resolve the Crimea issue, the Ukraine issue in the future, and the other track is going at the same time, talking about trade, talking about resuming the ties, talking about going prosperous on both sides.
Yes, I think that that should be very ideal scenarios once this visit will be called a successful one. Because as we know, always once there is not any, agreement from both sides, European Union side, the Russian side, on this position of Crimea, certainly there are very, very big political gap between two sides. But at the same time, I think always this visit by Chancellor Merkel also was regarded as a pragmatic visit, which means that yes, trade, economic cooperation, or some other issue could be touched by this within this visit. And also at the same time, we can find that for Chancellor Merkel, it's not only a business. It's not doesn't mean just for Mr. Udik. I think for Chancellor Merkel, because firstly she's a politician, he needs to take consideration about how the domestic politics firstly, because as we know now already, Germany is in the election season. So for the CDU, it needed to take some more cooperation from his sister party. And also at the same time, between Mr. Trump and President Putin. I think that now everybody is talking about unpredictability. I think Chancellor Merkel will try to take a comparison between those two leaders. Perhaps compare with Mr. Trump. I don't think that I don't believe that there will be a very unhappy meeting between those two leaders. Perhaps to look for some certainties from Mr. Putin, from Russia, will be in the interest of Chancellor Merkel and Germany.
Well, okay, complicated enough for us, very complicated. And I guess it's the same thing back at home, right, Mr. Vodka, for your family. So you probably could tell us as to what do you think President Putin could gain politically as a result of this? Will he have bigger bargaining chip toward the United States? Will he be able to talk to China and say, see, I also got these European partners now? Will Russia, as a result, get much better deals in terms of its trade?
Well, I guess that for President Putin, it's very important to be seen by his population to engage with the West again, and it is to show the effort in order to open the door again, lift the sanctions, despite the fact that in some areas, as rightfully pointed out, in agriculture, they benefited from the sanctions, but overall the people are hurt. It shows in the cities outside Moscow and St. Petersburg. And he has elections next year himself. The economy is not in very good shape, needs restructuring, and he has to show that he's engaging. Besides the fact that he was not really benefiting from this close relationship of China, where he has basically, if you look at the Russian emblem, the eagle looks east and west. And now for the whole time it had to look east only, and now he wants to emphasize the eagle looking west again.
It was interesting that said by some that elections usually divide the countries. But it's great to see elections that could actually bring countries together. We wish that trip could be a successful one, at least in this regard. Cui Hongjian, York Whitaker, and last but certainly not least, Mark Sleboda. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're watching World Insight on CGTN. Still to come on our program. I speak to the first women pair that crossed Antarctica, and I find out what it's like for women to thrive in polar exploration. You're watching World Insight on CGTN, coming to you from Beijing every Monday to Friday. In November 2000, two extraordinary female explorers, Bancroft and Liv Arnesen, began off their ambitious plan to cross Antarctica. Though their sail and ski journey was thwarted since early 2001 by a lack of wind, the pair were very close to reaching the South Pole. After 94 days covering 2,400 miles, they became the first women to cross the frozen continent. One from the United States and one from Norway. How did Anne and Liv finally come together? And how were those historical days across the Antarctica being spent? Earlier, the two women adventurers shared these glorious days and interesting experiences with me.
Well, I had been on I had led an expedition across Greenland and then to the South Pole with a group of women. And we only got as far as the South Pole. And so I came back and I was very disappointed, and I made a promise to myself that if ever I could organize again another expedition, I would do it. And over the course of some years, I learned about Liv, because she followed the next year on her solo trip, and I thought, that's who I want to go with, because she can really ski. So years later, I wrote her a note.
I had been a cross-country skiing, and I also had crossed the Greenland ice cap. And when I came home for the Greenland ice cap, I did that with another woman.
Yes.
And then I learned that this man was skiing to the South Pole and followed his expedition. And when I came, after my Greenland expedition, I came home and said to my husband, maybe I should ski to the South Pole, because I had this dream since I was 8 years old, and he knew it.
Wow.
And he said, well, you can do it.
But you were also alone. doing some of the expeditions compared to Anne?
I had a great time. But you know, I'm an introvert. I love poetry. I love literature. So I have so much. So I had a really good trip.
I'm sure during those trips you were not always as happy as you are talking to me right now.
No, I think I was really irritated and angry the first week because I came into an area with the snow was like frozen ocean, stormy ocean, really big waves. So I was telling myself, okay, from tomorrow you imagine that you're skiing in a modern gallery of art. And then I started to ski and focused on the pattern in the snow, pattern in the clothes, and then combining that, because I also brought poetry, my mind went all over. So I felt the energy come back.
Wow.
So that was fantastic. Because I was skiing in this wide open space, it was some lines how the sound of the pine trees, is swaying. Yeah. Because I was skiing in the wind, really cold wind. But then I was sort of imagining when I was thinking about that line, this was this beautiful summer wind in the pine trees.
But then, when you were working together, what was that relationship like?
She came over to my home state in Minnesota in the U.S., and we walked for a week talking. We did not talk about Antarctica, really. We talked about our families, and we talked about our past expeditions as women and how that made us feel and why we wanted to share it to a broader audience, that responsibility we felt as women at first. And we talked about education and how we were mixing them with our expeditions. And we found that not only our past expeditions were somewhat similar, Greenland, things like that. The literature that we read was very familiar. Right. Our family systems were familiar. That we had this, Liv calls it sister spirit, but we had this foundation of a friendship that was so quick. We're both introverts, so we don't have to talk all the time. We both love to read. So life for 97 days on Antarctica was mostly very smooth.
Oh my God.
We made decisions almost like without conversation sometimes. There was no leader. We did everything together. It's a very unusual thing, I think.
Is it intentional? There is no leader?
It was intentional.
Did you guys talk about this?
Yes.
And why?
I think because we both felt that we had the same experience, we both had the same background, and it was two people that we have the same vision of this expedition, and then it's easy, because we are going in that direction. Yeah. Okay, if there's something that we have to discuss, we'll figure it out.
Day and nights together, no fight?
I can tell you about the morning. No, I can tell you about the mornings.
Okay, all right.
Because
Somebody's laughing. Somebody's laughing.
Because I'm up early, getting out of the tent, getting some stuff in my sled, whistling and singing because it's such a beautiful day.
She's a whistler.
Yeah, I'm a whistler. And when I come back to the tent, because Anne is would like to be a little bit longer in the sleeping bag, and she said, Liv, that material in the tent is very thin.
Very polite, I have to say, under the circumstances.
Well, I tried to, pull myself together in the mornings, not being so happy and whistling.
So loud.
So loud.
Eventually, it turned out well. So, what has taught you about yourself, about women, about what these expeditions could do?
We got response from kids because we actually brought a satellite phone. And at the end of the expedition, we had to fly the last few miles because of the time schedule, and we were really down. Instead of thinking about actually what we have achieved, skied 3,000 kilometers, we reached 6 million kids in 116 countries. Yeah. So we had actually reached our goals because the educational part was the most important. And then we were just sitting here about the few miles we hadn't actually to. So, and then we were talking to the kids, and they were sort of supporting us and said, you have changed your life. No, I know what, you know, different things. And they said, well,
that's very sweet.
Are you sure that you want to go? It will be good to have such a good friend. Are you sure you want to go home? Was what a girl was saying. And one said, I can't understand that you haven't been quarreling. Do you have some good advice? My parents also need the advice. He said. So there's such comments. And we were sitting with the satellite phone between, and I got, you know, I was really moved. But then after I felt my tears, I was just looking over to Anne. Tears there as well. And then we just looked at each other. Here we are sitting, you know, depressed, feeling sorry for yourself for these few miles and listening to these kids. We have reached our goals. You know, let's talk about that rather than these few miles.
Yeah. What about for you?
I think we're always moved by the people that engage with our expeditions. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we focus on young people, but that expedition was somewhat of a surprise for us because we had women, we were in our 40s. And we were chasing a childhood dream, I say. You know, we had dreamed about Antarctica separately for so many of our young years. And women around the world were writing us and saying, I'm watching you two follow your dream and you're in your 40s. That means I can perhaps dust off one of mine and do it because I've been so busy raising a family or taking care of an aging parent or doing a job. Mm-hmm. I have dreams I still want to do, and it's not too late. Yeah. So that was a whole group of people that we didn't go to inspire. And what I've learned, you know, this is the same with teaching, is that when you try and inspire someone, oftentimes you get a huge dose of inspiration yourself from their stories.
Beautifully said. For women adventurers, it is not easy to take arduous expeditions with their male co-workers, especially for Anne and Liv, as female pioneers in the Arctic and Antarctic journeys. In 1986, Anne Bancroft became the first woman to reach the North Pole on foot and sled with 5 other male team members after 56 days. And in 1994, Liv Arnesen made international headlines, becoming the first woman in the world to ski solo to the South Pole. How do these stories resonate with their female identity? I asked them about that. Anne, tell me about yours. 1980s, you were already planning to go to the North and the South Pole. What was it like?
Well, it was an amazing time. I was a young 30-year-old woman, a teacher, and I had been dreaming about the top and the bottom of the world since I was a young girl, and I had an opportunity to go to the North Pole in 1986 with 7 men and 49 male dogs. And it changed my life. It taught me that my outdoor love and my educational love could actually come together.
And that was also the very first time women were being invited to be on that kind of expedition.
Well, I think I felt a lot of pressure because women were writing me all over the world about their excitement in seeing a woman doing something that hadn't been done before by a woman, but also in an environment that was already so foreign to so many people, the top of the world. You know, most people don't want to go there. So there was a lot of attention, and I felt the weight of the expectation on my shoulders because I just wanted to do it. I didn't want to do it for any purpose other than my own dream.
You're working on it for the half of the population of the world.
Yeah.
So,
but you know, later on I realized that that was important work too. That other women, women such as yourself, are blazing trails in other mediums, you know, other careers, and that helps us all as women take the next step. So that was really a very profound experience. And then the other thing is that I'm living a childhood dream in such a harsh environment.
Right.
It was the hardest work I'd ever done in my life. I felt like quitting sometimes, but then, you know, that I'd see an extraordinary scene and then you get re-energized, or, you know, one of the dogs gives you a big lick in the face and the world is right again.
Do you have a favorite among the 47?
Of course I do.
What is that? Who is
Sam.
that? Oh, Sam. All right. Sam is a great pup.
He was very handsome.
Yeah. Oh. What about the other men that are on the trip? They were helping you, or sometimes there could be some kinds of conflict?
Well, we're, you know, it's an interesting mix because we were very good friends and we still are, but we would have conflict. I would feel sometimes that they would not listen. They would talk over me, or they would give me compliments sometimes for things that they wouldn't give one of the guys a compliment about. And
that's not a compliment, as you may know.
Yes, and it would get, over time, it would get quite irritating, and I would try and explain that to them, and they didn't always understand.
How did you explain? Shout? Or
some days.
Or sometimes in a very genuine and ladylike way. It's hard, isn't it, in the
Sometimes
wild?
I had tantrums, and I could be difficult, and sometimes I would use humor. I think humor gets you many places, and I think just telling a story would oftentimes illuminate the feeling of what I was feeling better than me just trying to put words on it. You know, I would just simply tell a story of, why are you complimenting me for this? And then this big guy comes in after me and he's had a worse day than me, and nobody says anything. They don't say good things or bad things. So, you know, it's how do you keep their ears open to what you want them to hear? And I'm ready.
That's Anne's experience, but what about Liv, for you? I mean, you travel mainly on your own at the very beginning.
Yeah, I had one solo expedition, but I just have to comment, because I also been in expedition being the only woman. And my feeling is that being a woman, it's easier for the men to talk about their feelings to a woman. I think we have discussing that before, rather than to the men. So we were sort of the mother, become the mothers of the, you know.
Do you want to be in that room?
No, I don't want to be. But that's, I think that feels safer to talk about their feelings to a woman rather to a man in his
But what about for
team.
you? I mean, do you want to talk to them?
No, I think I just wanted to, you know, to reach the summit as they did. But you know, if they had, you know, was longing home or had a bad day or something, it was easier to talk to me rather to tell one of their friends.
What kind of support would they offer for you?
Oh, they were very supportive. Well, I got, for instance, when I was climbing Everest, I got altitude sickness. So they were very, you know, very careful with that, so I shouldn't push myself too hard, for instance. So they're looking after me. Then I realized that I was getting sick.
When you reflect back, do you look at yourself at the time as, I am very different. I'm a very different person on this team. Or you consider yourself to fit in as soon as possible. I am just a member of the team. The sex doesn't matter, or does it still matter?
The outdoor world is so physically oriented that you have to be big and strong to achieve these things. And that's a myth, really. It's really about working together. And some teams recognize that if you really want to achieve something and you have this group of people, it's better that you play on all your strengths and weaknesses. And one of the things I learned on the North Pole trip is that I was physically the smallest, and of course I don't compete with a 200-pound 6'6" man, you know, he's just huge. And, but my mental strength, I knew was strong. I knew I could do what I was setting out to do. And it was really illuminating that had actually more value. You know, a sense of humor. How is your attitude when the weather is horrible? How do you interact with your team members, etc.? And how well do you know yourself? Those are much bigger attributes for the group dynamic and success ultimately than sort of the physical strength.
And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, visit our website or try to find for us World Insight CGTN in your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on World Insight team, thanks for watching. And tune in again next time for insights from across China and around the world. Good night.